There's no feeling in the world that where you feel like I'm an idiot more than 15 minutes into an interview and the guest is just delivering a banger of an interview and you're like, I forgot to hit the record button. Really sorry about that.
Yeah, it's hard.
Welcome to the Predictable Revenue Podcast, where sales leaders teach you what's working for them so you can build it yourself. Feeling ready to kick your sales into high gear? We're here to help. Check out our sales coaching and consulting services at predictablerevenue.com.
Welcome back to the Predictable Revenue Podcast. I'm your host, Colin Stewart, and today I'm joined by Ty Allen. He's the founder over at SocialClimb, and we're going to talk product market fit. Ty, welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's great to be here. Appreciate you connecting with me, and I'm excited to see if I can share anything of value.
I think I've had a number of founders ask me when I reach out, they're like, oh, I'm not sure I'm a good fit for the show, or I'm not sure my story is that interesting. But I think especially when I was getting started as an entrepreneur 13 years ago, the thing that I was missing was like stories of regular people that struggled and eventually figured it out and what worked for them. I think there was so much content that was generated that came from like the VC world where they're like, oh yeah, I just raised $20 million. And then I looked at this market and suddenly I had product market fit. And so I think the messier, the more interesting stories are kind of what I'm shooting for. And I'm not trying to foreshadow anything here, but yeah, I'm just really excited to have you on, get a chance to hear your story. So we're talking about SocialClimb today. Where did this idea come from?
Speaking of messy, I think what you're about to hear would be described as very messy. So in my career, I had been involved in multiple tech startups and had some good and some bad. Sold one didn't work, one was still going at the time. In 2013, when I was involved in an accident and I fractured my neck. So I was a quadriplegic. I was laying on the ground after the injury and had no feeling below my shoulders and no movement below my shoulders. And as you can imagine, it was a life-changing experience. I'll skip a lot of the details and just say that I went through a process where I was correctly diagnosed. I had central cord syndrome and a fracture at C4, and had to start making a lot of really difficult healthcare decisions. My wife and I had to make those decisions. So it took 2 days in order for the swelling to go down enough for them to be able to do the initial surgery. I then had to start so I made a decision about a surgeon. I made a decision about when I came out of intensive care, where I was going to start therapy, how I was going to go through the process that would hopefully ultimately get me back in a position where I would function pretty well. I was in the hospital for about 6 weeks. And during that time, as I looked back on it, there were probably 6 to 8 key decisions that I had to make that I felt like I didn't have the right information to make the decisions, and they were dramatic impacts on how well I would recover. So today, if you met me in person and we were together, it would probably take you 10 minutes or so to notice something, and you'd be like, oh, he's definitely not able to do that. But for the most part, my recovery is miraculous. And I attribute that to great therapists, great occupational therapists, physical therapists, multiple surgeries from great doctors. And look, some of that was luck, and some of it was actually hard research that I did as a patient to say, I got to find the person that can help me with this. One thing in particular was I had a really hard time with my left hand. Learning to use my left hand, in particular, these 3 fingers on my left hand, took more than a year. I couldn't type with my left hand for more than a year. And wow. I had gone to 3 different occupational therapy groups. And then I eventually found a therapy group that was a specialist in hand. And the truth is, they looked terrible online. Like I had another group of friend there say, you need to go see so-and-so at this hand and therapy group. And I looked at him online and it didn't look good. It looked terrible, actually. But I went anyway, and I found him to be an amazing therapist who literally helped me reclaim the capability to use my left hand. And this is in my mid-40s. And so I got to know him really well. And I said, you're just not even thinking about marketing. You're not even thinking about how to position your capacity to help your patients to benefit the growth of your business. And so I said, why don't I help him? And then I started thinking, this is something I could put into a platform, and it's something that I could enable lots of people to use who don't know how to do this and will never be excited about doing it because they're really good at their core job. So that was the reason that I started the business. And there's a lot of details from there, but I'll let you ask me questions on where you want to go from here. But that was the genesis.
Wow, that's quite the story. I can imagine you sitting there halfway through building his WordPress and going, yeah, I think there's probably a better way. I probably shouldn't be ripping up another WordPress install and doing something. So I love that's where the insight came from. And whoa, what a story. What came next? Was it 100% all in on this idea? Was there what else did you do in terms of validation?
Well, one aside I'd say is I started telling my wife about my next idea for a software company. And she said, no, you have to learn how to drive again. You have to learn how to feed yourself again. No talking to me about new software ideas until you're a fully functioning human on your own. And then if that's what you want to do, I support you. She's awesome.
She has a smart wife.
Yeah. It took almost 18 months after the accident for me to be in a position where I was then able to start. So then I went to one of the smartest guys I've ever known. He was one of my employees. I hired him when he was 21. And I asked him if he was interested in doing a startup with me. And so we laid out an MVP basically for what features would we need to get this guy who was the therapist and a couple of other doctors who I'd gotten to know, all of which had something to do with my recovery, features that would make a difference for them. And so we defined an MVP, and he talked me into one other engineer that could join the team. And we built something in 2 weeks that started the basis. We, of course, rewrote it 5 times, but we started the basis of where we were going to go. I'm really the sales guy. I'm not the engineer. I have an engineering degree, but I'm not the engineer. So I also started reaching out to a lot of other people who had nothing to do with my recovery, just to assess what they were doing. And I got a really good sense of that the market was there. There was a gap. People didn't know what they were doing. People didn't even know what I was talking about. Half the time I'd have to explain it to them, and then they'd say, oh, I need that.
Hey, help me understand that piece, because I think that's one of the pieces I really want to understand is you found a gap. What did it look like? What did it feel like? What did it sound like?
Yeah, so one of the first places I went outside of my own network was to a friend of mine who ran a large orthopedics group in Las Vegas. And he was the CEO of the group. And I called him and just talked to him about, well, what do you do to power growth? You're in 4 locations in the Vegas area. You've got 1 surgery center. What's your next move to go from the 19 or 18 docs? You have to add capacity, blah, blah, blah. Mm-hmm. And he basically said, I don't know. I keep paying this agency this money, and I don't really see a return on the dollars. They've done nice things on my website, but they run some ads, and I can't really tell whether the ads are working. So I went, well, they're not even really enabling him to win search. Like, the easiest thing to do would be, what can you do to win more searches in the Las Vegas area for orthopedic needs, and therefore drive more traffic to your practice? That's the very basics. So now we look at it, it's 2025, and we're like, well, people were not thinking about search marketing. In healthcare, it always trails. So even though search marketing was legitimately a thing in 2013 and 2014, most healthcare organizations didn't even have it on their radar. And so that's when I said, well, I'm going to focus on healthcare. My MVP is going to be focused on healthcare. That's what I was passionate about because of my recoveries and my injury. And so I really got into the weeds of how patients are trying to find, how much freedom does a patient have to choose? What kind of restrictions are there on that? So I found that the independent practices were frustrated because the hospitals would suck the good cases out of the market. Independent practices would often have a difficult time. They'd also be dependent on, in some cases, the hospital for parts of the care cycle, the surgery, the other things. And so I saw this trend where independents were trying to say, okay, I can maybe own my own destiny and not let the hospital dictate everything to me. It's the lay of the land that I found.
I'd love to zoom in on one of those interviews. Do you remember, was there a specific time where you remember, oh, there might be something here, like a specific conversation or the way somebody said something?
Yeah, I asked that particular group in Las Vegas. So I got to know some of the docs. And I said, well, in your practice, you have specialties. An orthopedic practice, a big one would have maybe 5 or 6 key areas of specialty. You got hip and knee and sports and upper extremity and spine. Who's not getting enough cases? who would like to have more selective capability in their cases. And so they said, well, these guys over here, the sports guy, he wants more. The hip and knee guy and the spine guy are where we make the most money. So I was able to talk to some of those guys and understand. And what I found was a lot of these guys were doing their own marketing on the side. They were part of a group. They had a group website. They had brand. And then they were building their own brand on the side. And they were paying a marketing guy on the side to do other stuff for them. And they were competing against each other, and they're partners in the same practice.
Yeah.
And so I listened to what they thought was valuable in the stuff they were doing on the side and said, why don't we build that back into a suite that's real easy for your core team to contract for the whole organization? Then you get synergy instead of competition. You're not causing your costs to go up as you compete with each other. And that to me was like, well, this is a need. I knew it was a need because they were spending significantly on it, but nobody had built anything that made sense to aggregate into a core thing for a large group or even a hospital group.
I love those moments where somebody says something and it just doesn't make sense to you. You're like, wait, you have a marketing team, but you also do your own marketing on the side? That's insane.
Yeah. And they didn't even know. Some of them didn't know their other guy was doing it. I'm talking to one guy. I said, I do this, but don't tell anybody I do this. I do this. Don't tell anybody. Okay.
You guys are all competing on AdWords against each other, running up the cost.
Yes.
Oh, wow. And so roughly how many folks did you talk to in the validation step?
Oh, boy. Well, before we got our first customer, got our first paying customer, I probably talked to maybe a dozen different groups. And then also I got into the weeds with some local groups that I could actually ask the really hard questions. I feel like I was still in the validation phase long after we got a bunch of customers. Because we just kept adding features and learning more, but we built something after maybe a good 10 or 12 deep dives that was valuable enough that people would start paying us.
Really interesting. I want to follow up on the validation stage took longer than you think, but I want to maybe ask the question now, how long did it take to get that first customer and who was it that dropped first?
Oh yeah, let's see. We were about 8 months to first paying customer. We were probably only about 4 months to first non-paying customer with a couple trial customers. So about 8 months. And then, sorry, what was the next question?
Yeah, I guess who was it and where did they come from?
Oh, so the therapist here that was near my home was one of the first customers. The orthopedic group in Las Vegas was one of the first customers. And then the orthopedic group in Las Vegas is part of a big network, national network that's in 43 states, where they get together multiple times a year, share best practices. They don't compete with each other. So it's an association that allows them to share best practices with each other. And they started connecting me with their friendlies and buddies in that area. And so we picked up customers in Arizona and Tennessee. And I couldn't get in that group as a vendor, national group, for about another year, but now almost all the people in that group use us. So that networking effect, and orthopedics is definitely still one of our better specialties.
I love it. And so it seems like if we think about Dave McClure's Pirate Metrics, right, you were able to acquire them, activate them, and retain them. And it sounds like, and obviously like the retention turned into the referral. I know I skipped revenue, but when I'm thinking about product market fit, revenue is is a check mark and not like a measurement when you're looking at this kind of thing, especially in the early days. And so it really seems like that referral coefficient was huge for you here.
Yeah. And it worked because we worked with the group in Las Vegas to the point where they started seeing month to month measurable increases in patient flow and revenue. And so when they would connect us with one or two others, they would say, what we're using with them is actually growing our revenue and the cost is tiny.
Sounds like you screwed up pricing.
I did. That's a whole nother topic.
Fair enough. I think my favorite part of the story so far, it sounds like you really stayed in the pocket with looking at the product. And it wasn't just, okay, we got something, let's switch to growth mode and try and sell as many of these as we can.
Yeah, that's a frustration for some of my team members because my approach is that I always am seeking the next layer of innovation. So we now have in our suite really four areas that we can sell. I just described to you the first one, which is managing listings, driving reputation building, which seems like a commodity now, but at that time it wasn't. And so I love to sell, but I also love to innovate. And so instead of just saying, okay, we got one thing and we're gonna now try to run the table with it, I like to spin up a process where we have multiple threads, one that's doing that, and one that continues to innovate and listen to the customers, go deeper on what's the next feature it's connected or ancillary to what we already do, but would really then continue our differentiation in the market. And so that's my passion, actually. Like the stuff we're doing now with AI in helping these practices is the most fun I've ever had. And I sold this business in October of last year. And one of the reasons we sold it is because of the innovative stuff that we've been doing with AI.
I love that. And I'll follow up on that in a minute for anybody who's listening going, oh, ask them that question. But I want to stay on the kind of product market fit journey, because I think so many founders get this advice where they're pressured to sell. You got to sell right away, not in terms of sell the company, but you got to sell as many units as you can as fast as possible. But you hung in there, and it sounds like you didn't really jump into sales and marketing as hard as you could. You tried to strengthen the product to the point where you were getting that referral coefficient. And I have this like hypothesis that the stronger the product market fit as measured by your referral coefficient, so the percentage of folks that come through your pirate metric funnel and then end up as giving you a referral, is one of the best measures of product market fit. And the stronger that number is, the easier your go-to-market is going to be. And I see a lot of founders, and I've helped a lot of founders make this mistake, because in my previous life, I ran a demand gen agent or lead gen sales development agency. And I've seen so many people waste tons of time and money on inefficient go-to-market because they didn't do this thing. What gave you that confidence that I need to continue strengthening when everybody else in the world at this time must have been raise as much as you can, spend as much as you can on sales and marketing?
So I got to give some credit here to my CTO, who really is a co-founder with me in the business. He's the young guy that I told you about, that I first met him when he was 21. And he's an amazingly self-made guy, and he's super practical. And what he wanted to do was make the product so well run, so well managed, that our expenses to roll out a customer, to implement a customer, and to deliver really high quality, super high availability of our platform, he's so passionate about it. And so my tendency is a bit to go, as you've said, let's grow as fast as we can. I also love to innovate. And he's the guy that says, okay, we're going to innovate, but we're going to build it the right way. And so he kind of kept me grounded. He was like the counterbalance to my craziness a little bit. And I would say that's a big portion of why we've been successful. Is I would lean to be too aggressive, and he would lean possibly be too conservative, and the balance helped us find the right mix in there of investing in the platform versus purely just selling whatever we could sell.
And it sounds like there's a lot of credit due to both of the founders here for playing this kind of the balancing act, because I could totally see somebody who I hired when they were 21 joining me as a co-founder. I'm an experienced entrepreneur now. I could very easily dominate that relationship. Not that I would, but you could see how those power dynamics would play out. It sounds like that wasn't an issue for you.
Yeah, I had enough wisdom. I don't know how much wisdom I have, but I had enough wisdom to listen to him. And he's also such a hardworking guy that he made do with, I funded the startup. Like, we didn't take any seed funding. I funded this with my own winnings from a previous business. And we resisted taking any outside funding until we were at a metric that we felt we were comfortable with. And that took a little longer than we wanted, but we decided as a team that was okay. And I don't know that I have a really solid data for you on when to make that decision,
Yeah.
I think it had more to do with our team dynamics and just reading the market, how big we thought it was, and the ability that we had. We didn't have to have hyper growth. We knew that if we did the right things, we'd get to that point at some time. And building the platform was one of the things that high quality platform was one of the things we wanted to emphasize. And in the end, that high quality platform was the reason we got acquired. When the diligence process ran from the group that ended up buying us, they looked at 2 or 3 competitors and they came back and said, well, your platform's like 10 times better than any of them. They have great sales and marketing, but we can see how we can take your platform at scale to do really interesting things.
Amazing. So you got your first customers from the customer development process, talking to folks that you had met, talking to folks, those 12 other groups that you'd interviewed. It sounds like the next groups, was it straight to referrals from there, or was there any other channels in between? Like, I'm trying to figure out, where did that next cohort, was it right to referrals and referrals the whole way, or what came next?
So we started joining associations, exhibiting at events, and that next chunk of business, which was still in orthopedics, by the way, we spent the first 2.5 to 3 years only in orthopedics and related things. So therapy, occupational therapy, most of it was word of mouth, but there was a layer that we started to add in of traditional marketing activities. So we added a guy who would call outbound to these groups and did a little traditional marketing. We didn't have a lot of budget, but we started getting customers outside of our referral network to add to the mix.
Gotcha. And maybe I'd love to describe the moment where you realized, because you said it took a while for you to continue to invest in the product, and you feel like you found product market fit, but it wasn't where you wanted it to be.
It wasn't complete.
It wasn't complete. Describe the moment when you realized it might be complete.
Well, I still have other ideas. We're working on some other really cool stuff, but I knew we had a suite of tools that was good enough when large hospital groups who got connected to us came in and said, wow, we could use this, and we can cut 3 vendors out of our vendor base, put your platform in place, get the ROI tracking that's built into your platform to help us measure all marketing dollars that we're spending. And we now have full grasp of what our dollars in healthcare marketing are buying us. That when I had a big hospital group tell me that, I went, wow, that's a story I should be telling, and I've never even said it before.
It's amazing when you're doing something so new and your customers' words are so much more powerful than all the gobbledygook that's going around in here.
Too many words in my head. I heard this customer say that. I wrote it down, and we started trying to use that in our storytelling.
Tattooed all across the website, of course.
Yep.
Talk to me about what comes next. It sounds like you were acquired last year. You're focusing on, you've got some other things coming down the pipeline. What's next for Ty and SocialClimb?
Okay, so I talked to you a little bit about how we help you win search. We built a whole suite of tools in there that also helped you do your mandated patient experience assessments, so surveys and government mandated surveys and healthcare insurance related surveys, a bunch of stuff like that we built. And then the thing that we got into, which was the most fun and really opened the door for where we're going next, is we started using machine learning and publicly purchasable data about all the adults in the US and what we knew about who were the current patients in our customer base. In a HIPAA compliant way, we built predictive models that can tell a marketer in their geographic area who's trending toward certain types of care or who's likely to be trending toward certain types of care. So instead of marketing to the 1 million people in your area, you feel from an age perspective are the right people to market to, just market to these 20,000 people. The response rates to that type of marketing is like 10x per dollar. So just the return on investment when you market with a known targeted audience is so much better. And so that's the last feature set that we built. And we layered on top of that the ROI tracking. That opened the door for the acquisition by a company called RL Datix, which most people wouldn't know. RL Datix they're headquartered in the UK, but they've got quite a presence in the US. And these guys are asking us to do something similar to what I just described, but to get smarter about patient safety. So nobody's yet in the market done, I know I'm getting really nerdy here, but nobody's done patient experience, data collection and understanding, and patient safety analysis. The scary thing is, when you go to the hospital, you have a 6% chance of having something negative happen to you, an infection, a mistake by someone. It happens. That needs to get improved. How can we improve that? How can we learn from what patients are telling us about their experience in reviews and surveys, combined with all the data that we have about patient harm incidents that do happen, and build a machine that identifies what patterns are going wrong in these hospitals and make suggestions on policies and procedures to diminish those incidents and make it safer, make it better for everyone. That's the theory behind the acquisition of my business into RL. So it's not marketing anymore. It is, of course, there's a marketing layer of that once you tell the story, once you know that you're better.
Of course.
But literally making healthcare safer is our next quest.
Did that come with a high-vis vest?
Yeah. It's a huge, people have been trying to do this for years, but
Yeah.
I don't think anybody's ever had the tools that are available today with AI and all of the big data models that we can use. So we're already doing a bunch of things I just described to you. Now, how can we put it into the platform and commercialize it is the next step.
That's really incredible. Ty, it's been a pleasure to hear your story. If people are sitting here listening, what's the best way for them to get in touch with you or to learn a little bit more about RL or SocialClimb?
Yeah, I'd love to hear. Email address is tallen@socialclimb.com. And you can obviously check us out at socialclimb.com, and rldatix.com is our new parent company where we're really trying to do some innovation. I love startups. I'm in this weird position now where I'm in a bigger, older company, still trying to do a reinvention inside the company. But man, I'd love to help other people with their startups if I ever can.
I'd love that. I got something I'll talk to you about after the show. I've got a founders community, and we do a monthly revenue meetup, revenue kind of roundtable. Maybe we could have a conversation about that.
That'd be great.
Right on. If anybody's listening, drop me an email and for more information on that, or I'll include a link to the newsletter. I've got a separate founders newsletter if you're interested. Ty, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you. I really appreciate it.
This is great. Thanks to everybody for listening. We'll talk to y'all next week.